Good morning, everybody. It's Monday morning, and welcome to Pen Vicar. Lovely to see you. I hope you had a lovely weekend. Thank you, as always, for joining us for our Bible talk for today as we continue our adventure through Genesis. Now, today we're in chapter 9, and the context is that we've had there's been the flood, and Noah's been, and his family, and the animals have been in the ark, and the waters have now receded, and they've just basically got out of the ark. And that's what happens at the beginning of chapter 9. So here goes, Genesis chapter 9. God blessed Noah and his sons, and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear and dread of you shall rest on every animal of the earth, and on every bird of the air, and everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea, into your hand they are delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you, and just as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. Only you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. For your own lifeblood I will surely require reckoning. From every animal I will require it, and from human beings, each one for the blood of another, I will require reckoning for human life. Whoever sheds the blood of a human, by human shall that person's blood be shed. For in his own image God made humankind. And you, be fruitful and multiply, abound on the earth and multiply in it." Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, "As for me, I am establishing my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that's with you, the birds, the domestic animals, and every animal of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark. I will establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth." And God said, "This is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that's with you, for all future generations. I have set my bow in the clouds, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth and the bow that's seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that's between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and all the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that's on the earth." God said to Noah, "This is the sign of the covenant that I've established between me and all flesh that's on the earth." The sons of Noah who went out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. These are the three other sons of Noah, and from these the whole earth was peopled. Noah, a man of the soil, was the first to plant a vineyard. He drank some of the wine and became drunk, and he lay uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. Then Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, and walked backward and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine and saw that his youngest son had done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan, lowest of slaves shall be to his brothers." He also said, Blessed by the Lord my God be Shem, and let Canaan be his slave. May God make space for Japheth, and let him live in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his slave. After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. All the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay, so lots in this. So they've come out of the ark, and they're, in a sense, they're told to kind of start again, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, and so on. And it's a bit like Genesis chapter 1, when the world was created, and chapter 2, beg your pardon, when the human beings were created, were told to people the earth, and so on. Although, in a sense, although it's a new creation, you very much get the impression that it's new, but it isn't, because things have changed, actually. Things not the same as it was before. It really isn't. You reckon that you can see that sin has come into the world, and as I say, things have changed. So, for example, you have things like fear. The animals become in fear of humanity. You've also got things like crime and punishment. That's when someone spills the blood of a human being, then that person's blood is to be spared as well. So, for the first time ever, you get a kind of crime and punishment situation going on here. So whereas in Genesis chapters 1 and 2, it's very much kind of go out into the world and everyone lives together in peace and harmony and so on. You realize in chapter 9 that although it's a new creation, and although much of the world has been washed clean, actually things have changed. And that, say crime and punishment kind of comes in for the first time. And you sort of see it here really in in the early verses of chapter 9. So things are new, but it's not the same. It's crime and punishment that's come in here. You also get very much a sense also of the sanctity of life. There's all this thing about human blood and the blood of animals and so on being the life. And you very much get the impression here of the sanctity of human life, that life is precious, and that God kind of wants to make that clear because humanity is made in God's image, that life is precious. So here you really do get the importance of the sanctity of life. And it's really important actually as a church, and we have tried with limited some degree of success over the years to actually stand for the sanctity of life, that life is precious, and it's very clear in the early verses of chapter 9 here that God kind of reinforces here the sanctity of life, especially human life, and that's really important. That life is precious, that life is a gift, and that it's holy in God. Moving on from that though, then you get this covenant which God makes between himself and humanity, and which in sort of verses 9 to 13, where God says that he'll never do this again. That this flood has come and everything's been wiped off the face of the earth, but God says here that he'll never do it again. And it's called a covenant. Now, covenant's an interesting word because it's more than a deal, it's more than an arrangement, it's a kind of binding agreement between two parties. And it's interesting actually because unlike an agreement you might get or a contract, it's not between two equal parties. Having a covenant with God, it's not between two equal parties because God's so much bigger than we are. But God makes a covenant here with his people, and it forms an agreement with them. And you get a few covenants in the Bible where God says, I will do this, and our response is something in return. But here, God makes a covenant with his people that after what's happened, he says, I will never do this again. And as a mark of the covenant, then you get the bow, the famous rainbow that comes over. And it's a kind of sign that marks the covenant. And actually, we do this in life, don't we? Because, for example, you form a covenant when you get married, and you have a wedding ring as a sign that this covenant has taken place. In the new covenant, we have the bread and the wine, which is between the covenant. Jesus gives us the new covenant in his blood, and so on. And in the old covenant, of course, you had the Ten Commandments, there's tablets that came down, walked around in the ark, and so on, the Ark of the Covenant later. So quite often when we have covenants, we have things that mark them out. There's signs of them. And as you have a wedding ring to mark a covenant of a marriage, similarly in this covenant here, the rainbow is a sign that God says, I'll never do this again. So it's God's covenant with us. And the rainbow is quite interesting because it's been kind of commandeered recently by all sorts of groups. The NHS used it in lockdown, COVID, and so on. And of course, it's been often used by the LGBT movement and so on. Just to say that God got there 4,000 years earlier, and it was God's agreement with us. It's a sign of God's covenant with us. But I do think it's interesting that all the colours go together to form white light in a rainbow, and that it demonstrates the fact that we are one body in God, but also that humanity is rainbow, and actually we need each other, and the variety of humanity is not an accident. God has made us all different. I feel very passionate about this. God's made us different for a reason, and that we need each other. For example, I remember a former Archbishop of Canterbury's wife saying that when you study the Bible, do it with people that aren't like you, so you get different perspectives on it. And so the kind of rainbow community, which is God's church, from every tribe and every language and every tongue and so on. So the rainbow is interesting because it's a sign of the covenant, but it's also the variety that's therein that is in it as well. And then finally at the end, you get this rather bizarre thing about verse 19, the end, about Noah and his sons, and how and this kind of quite nasty little bit at the end about Noah basically sets a vineyard and gets horribly drunk, and then he says that one of his sons kind of sees him naked and tells the other brothers and kind of shames his dad, and it's a kind of a slightly strange passage. I think a couple of things to bring out of it is worth saying. Firstly, it shows that Noah was a great man of God. Noah was a man of enormous faith. But like all great men of faith, he was also imperfect. The only perfect man of faith ever has been Jesus. David was a man of faith. He fouled up with Bathsheba. and lots of the other, Abraham, as we'll find out in a couple of chapters' time, got it very right often, but also got it very wrong often as well. These are flesh and blood human beings, and that Noah was a great man of God who walked with God, who showed enormous faith. But actually here you show that he actually got horribly drunk, and so he wasn't perfect. And the other interesting thing about it, of course, is that it's one of the sons is called Canaan who spots it. Now Canaan's interesting because, of course, Canaan is the name of the land which later became Israel, and the Canaanites were known to be a particularly kind of sinful lot. For all sorts of unpleasant and sexual perversities, and so on and so on and so on. And I think there's a prefiguring of that here in this, and that it's important that we it's put in the same way that the land was cleansed under Noah. It's important that when the people went into when they went into Israel, they had to cleanse that land as well. That it became God's land, and it became the place which is pure, rather than place which is impure, if that feels so. Canaan's the son who commits the perversity, if you like. But I think it's prefiguring, looking forward to a time where that would again happen in future. But the land needed to be claimed for God, and claimed for good, and claimed for holiness. That's just a thought for you. You can make of that whatever you like. Read it again at your leisure. So here in this chapter 9. Much to think about, okay? So we've got a new creation, but things have changed, hence the crime and punishment comes in. You've got the sanctity of life coming in here. You've got the covenant between God and his people. They'll never do this again. An agreement, a solemn agreement between God and humanity. You've got the rainbow, which is the sign of the covenant, being both a sign, like we use signs to covenants like wedding rings and so on. But you've also got the rainbow in it, the rainbow people, which is the people of God. And finally, you've got Noah being not perfect, a great man of God, but flesh and blood human being, and not perfect. The only perfect human being's ever been, of course, is Jesus. And again, you've got Canaan here, and it kind of looks forward to the day when, like in all our lives, that impurity needs to be made pure, and land and our lives need to be claimed for God, to put God first. Lots of you to think.